Hi guys, thank you so much for joining Ace Your Health podcast. My name is Ace Choksey. This is Aaron Hanley.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We've been talking about gardening for a while, and we've gone through a couple different topics. Most recent topic that we went through was seed starting in the most ecological way. This is part 2 of this. If you haven't seen the first part, make sure you watch the first part as well so you understand what we're talking about. There are certain terminologies and things that you'll have to look into. Now, to continue our conversation on seed starting, what are some of the basic concepts, right? Like if, we talked about looking at the labels and some terminology, but what are the concepts behind seed starting? What should one look at?
Sure. And I'm going to actually add one because I did not put this in my notes, but it's actually very important, and that is to be organized and plan. You do need to plan for an adventure like this, meaning you want to have the materials that you're going to need at your disposal when you need them. And if you're starting seeds in January or February, you want to make sure that you've got seed catalogs or that you're prepared to purchase seeds online and that those seeds come to you probably no later than the end of February, because by that point it may be too late to start your tomatoes, onions, and some of those longer season crops. So do have your materials readily available, but outside of that, I would say there are at least 5 important key takeaways when it comes to planning for seeds in this way.
Okay. Let's address the first 2 first.
Yes. So the first one, you want to choose the right soil mix for seed starting, and this is where it gets a little complicated because I just said soil mix, but in reality, this is a soilless mix. You want a mix, a seed starting mix, and you can purchase these right online, and it just gives you exactly what you need. This is very friable, light soil, which does not contain any inorganic matter, meaning we talked about soil in a couple classes ago. We talked about the constituents of soil, clay, silt, and sand. Well, for seed starting, you don't want those components in the soil because they're heavy. And the roots of seeds need to be able to branch out easily. So you want a light, soilless mix with good drainage. You obviously will need to keep your seeds evenly moist. You don't want it to be like a sponge that you can, wring out, but it should feel moist throughout, so not waterlogged, but also not too dry. And light and temperature are also important. So for example, some seeds, very few, but some actually require light to germinate. Most seeds, however, don't. They will germinate just fine underneath the soil, no light at all. Other seeds have a preference for heat. So your tomatoes and your peppers actually like to have the soil to be a little bit warmer than, say, parsley or some cooler type of crop. So it's good to know which of your crops you might need to put on a radiator, or maybe you need to buy a heat mat for those seeds if you don't either have a warm home or you don't have something that would warm up those seeds like a radiator or heater.
That is so interesting. This sounds like learning a different matrix for the seeds and growing plants. And that's one of the reasons why certain things grow in certain areas in the world, because it's their natural environment where they're growing. But, okay, so we addressed those. What are the next 2 things?
Okay,
what are those other concepts that we're looking at?
Yes, frost. You definitely want to know the dates of danger of frost in your locale. So for example, in Ohio, in southwestern Ohio, our frost danger is anything prior to April 19th, and this is based on, statistics that they look at year in and year out. And frost is also more likely to happen dates after October 17th. So before,
this is in the Midwest area.
Correct. Yeah. And it may differ slightly between, let's say, Ohio and Indiana or Ohio and Kentucky, but generally speaking, our frost danger in the Midwest is going to be early spring, obviously, or as we get into the fall. Well, why do you need to know that? You need to know that because your seed packets will tell you how many weeks prior to that frost date will you need to, plunk this into something, whether it be in a container or if you're going to sow outside, whether you need to pop it into the ground. But either way, you need to understand those frost dates so that you're not putting plants out prematurely, that you're not trying to grow things that take a long season and you're trying to, because we're not going to rush nature.
Yeah.
So it's very important to understand those frost dates. Looking and speaking about labels, it will also tell you whether or not this particular seed wants to be sowed indoors or outdoors. Believe it or not, there are some seeds that you're not going to grow from seed indoors. They just won't do well. And we've got a list. We'll put that list out there. So that's very important that you follow the instructions on the labels. They're there for a reason. And that's about it.
That's so interesting. So these are certain things that all of us have to think about while we are purchasing seeds and what type of environment that you have at home. You look at the temperature, you look at the light, then that, you have to assess your environment first so that you can go out and purchase those certain type of seeds, or you get the seeds and then create that environment.
Exactly.
To have a proper growth. Otherwise, you're going to try something and you don't have the environment and it's going to fail. So that's pretty cool. So what type of growing system? This is one of the questions that somebody asked us. They wanted to know what type of growing systems are available. So what does that mean? Like, I haven't heard of that.
Yes. As you can see here, these look like your common household items, right? I mean, most people will have some sort of pot, right? Or even plastic pots. A lot of people who eat eggs, you can find these cartons around. In speaking to the ecological way of starting seeds, this is how I do it. It's not necessarily the right way or the wrong way, but just one way to do it. For other folks, and especially if you're wanting to grow a lot of food, it might make sense to buy a more elaborate system, something that comes to you in a kit, for example. And there are seed starting trays that you can purchase, anywhere from 24 to almost 300 different cells. And that just means, holes within a tray that you can put the seeds into. Those tend to be more costly. They can come with covers, which means it will create a nice little micro environment. So for your humid-loving plants, it's really nice to have. I don't think it's necessary, and as we develop this program, I'm going to give you those tips and tricks, things that you can do at home without having to purchase some more elaborate systems, but still get the same results. And that way, you're not necessarily purchasing something online and waiting for it to come in. You can really do seed starting with various materials that you have right at home.
So growing systems these are different types of growing systems that we have.
Correct.
That makes sense. So somebody also asked us this one question about where can I source materials for seed starting? So if they want to get all of these stuff, and obviously the seeds, we talked about them a little bit. In different regions, you have different websites and different farmers and different
companies that are just familiar with growing what would typically grow in your area. So I always like to say buy local.
Yeah. So where can they source these materials from, this kind of stuff?
Okay, so we'll just start here, and I brought a couple of various size pots. Obviously, you can just grow right inside of a pot. There's nothing to say that you cannot do that. You absolutely can, when I do lettuce, when I grow any kind of lettuce, whether it's arugula or leaf lettuce or some of the smaller, I shouldn't say any kind of lettuce. I'm really referring to the leaf lettuces and those smaller greens or microgreens as they're known. They do really well in a more shallow pot like this, and I can get quite a number of plants in here, and without having to do individual lettuces, for example. So that's a really good way to kind of broadcast a number of seeds and get a nice crop in one pot, and it's easier. That's not always appropriate for every type of crop. Take green beans, for example, or even celery. They're actually like a longer pot, so to speak. And this is where your toilet paper, or let me back up, your paper towel rolls can come in really handy for those crops that tend to have longer root systems. They're just given more space to grow. I actually have grown all kinds of things in just regular old toilet paper rolls, and these do just fine.
You're really recycling stuff.
Yeah, well, the kids make fun of me, but that's okay. We save these all year round, so that when seed starting season occurs, I have a ton of these to use. And this can also go right into the ground. I don't have to extract the plant from its container.
Oh, really?
This will biodegrade right into your ground.
Oh, wow. That's genius. That is genius. So you can pretty much use anything. What can you not use?
So you don't want to use anything that could potentially contaminate what you're growing. Flowers and things that maybe you wouldn't eat, you could be probably a bit more loose with. But if you're going to eat other flowers, for example, I would not put them in anything that would, could be potentially toxic. I have seen a lot of people growing in big aluminum tubs. I say don't do that.
What about glass?
I think glass is perfect, and I'm a big fan of glass.
Well, you have to extract it out before you put it in.
You would, if you were to use something like this, which is a casserole dish. I've got lots of these at home, and I did my basil in this last year. You put a layer of pea gravel at the bottom, then your soilless seed starting mix. Then you're going to seed right in here and keep this moist, and you will get a lot of plants, which you can then prick out and pop into the ground when the time comes. So you do also, just on a side note, want to make sure that you sterilize. Let's talk about sterilization real quick, because there's two key concepts with this. It's important to sterilize the containers that you're going to use, so that you're not...
How do I sterilize this?
Well, that you don't have an option. I mean, there's really no way to sterilize that. But you want to try to avoid contaminating your plants in any way, shape, or form. And so I take the extra precaution to either just throw it in the dishwasher, wash it by hand, or use something like doTERRA's On Guard concentrated cleaner. This will kill just about any nasty thing. And this way I can be more assured that less pathogens would be showing up in my plants. Now, the interesting thing though, while you want to sterilize the containers like this, you actually don't want a sterile soil mix. Sterilized soil mixes will kill also the beneficial organisms within that medium. So you don't want to buy sterilized mix. But at the same time, it's kind of a balance, I guess.
That's pretty cool. Are there any other things that other systems that we have that we need to be familiar with?
So egg cartons, and these are great for small fingers. Little kids. I tend to do really well with containers like this because it's small. You can fit just the right amount of soil in there and at least get some plants started. They're not going to last long on something like this.
Are they biodegradable?
They are. These are. Would not, personally, I don't like to grow in plastic because of potential...
Is this plastic?
And it is not. This is just paper. What you might want to do, though, is just drill a small hole into each one of these cells to ensure proper drainage. Notice that this is not very deep. So at some point, the roots are going to get stunted in here, and you're going to need to transplant whatever is growing in here into maybe something larger like this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a fan of peat, and the reason for that is strictly environmental. There are a lot of endangered species and wildlife habitats that like to live near peat bogs.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we destroy their environment, we essentially destroy them. So I'm not a fan of peat. I prefer fiber. And these are just different types of fiber, but this is all biodegradable.
That's
and
really
these
cool.
work really, really well. I've also used like mushroom containers. That's an option for you. And this is a different kind of mushroom container that already has pre-drilled holes. So this makes it really easy to grow various things in. And I like using these larger casserole dishes because, as you'll notice, I can set, you know, several different size pots into one container. And the reason you want to have this is just so that it collects water. It's just easier to, when you're watering these plants, to make sure that, you know, water just stays right within the container. You're not having to constantly transfer them back and forth to your sink or tub or whatever.
Okay. Wow. That is so many. I mean, these are really good tips. Thank you. You know, a lot of us will just throw away, or, I mean, I do it all the time. Never thought about using this for seed starting, but that's a very good tip. So that's what we have for today. I think we covered now 2 sessions. Our third one will be a little bit more in depth, and we'll go into more about how to use each one of these things. But these are small little pieces that you have to slowly absorb, and you can obviously binge all the episodes when you have some time. But
it's just a lot easier than you think, too.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems a bit technical, maybe even complicated, but trust me, this is very simple to do. We're going to show that demo in the next class.
That's interesting. You know, one question I had that I forgot to ask, somebody had asked me, are there other like special considerations for these kind of things?
Yes, especially for edibles, because we're eating edibles. I started to go into this a little bit, but I've seen folks use railroad ties, for example, and they look super cool. I don't deny that, but there is a chemical in railroad ties that will leach into your soil, and I highly recommend that you do not go that route. Even though they're cheap to buy, easy to source, don't use railroad ties. I wouldn't use cement. I would not use tires either. If you're not, if you wouldn't eat a meal out of it, I probably wouldn't grow a plant in it. And that would be maybe a good barometer.
That's a good way to think about that. Yeah. Because I have seen people use tires to grow their plants.
And that's perfectly fine for your flowers and other things that you wouldn't eat. But I wouldn't grow a bed of lettuce in there.
That's a very good point. All right, guys. That's all we have for today. And if you have any questions, obviously, please ask us. We'll print them out. We'll talk about them. And she'll answer all your questions, as many as you have and as much time as we have. But, yeah, please like, subscribe, join the community. We have tons of more information in there. And we'll come back with our next video next time. Thank you so much, guys. Take care.
You.
Bye.